Hi, this is Albert from AWB Electrical and Marine Services. Just going to go through a quick rundown of alternators with regards to a question I commonly get, which is P-type and N-type alternators. So normally if you're modifying your alternator, you can either modify it or you can purchase an alternator, it's modified already for you. And normally the two main configurations are P-type or N-type. There's not much to it. Like in terms of an alternator is an alternator. And just a rundown of it, you've got the rotor through the middle here. And that connects to an armature. And inside there, you'll have your slip rings. So there's no direct electrical connection from the rotor and armature assembly to the stator and diode on the back. And then normally you'll have your stator on the outside and some form of diode or rectifier assembly on the back of the alternator. The only difference is when you're doing this is that when you're doing it with these Wake Speeds, Arco Zeuses, Alpha Pros, Altions, etc., is all you're doing is you're driving a voltage into those slip rings, and that voltage creates a magnetic field on the rotor, which interacts with the stator to produce the voltage and current that you need for your system. So with regards to that, you've got your P-type and your N-type. So with your P-type, your regulator supplies its voltage. So it's a positive voltage source to the slip rings. And then the slip rings, basically, you're going in and out with your slip rings. Doesn't matter which one. And then it goes to negative. On the N-type, you're basically grounding it, and you've got a positive source going into your slip rings, and then you're grounding it. So you're controlling it either supply or sink. It's pretty much the two different ways you're doing it. There's reasoning behind that. With electronics, when you're sinking current, it's easier to sink more current, so from a positive source through to itself, as opposed to try and supply or in electronics term source. So in electronics you'd call that sourcing and you'd call that sinking. And then with it, some, like America will do it one way, Europe will tend to do it another way. But the main reason why they vary it with alternators, apart from that sinking sourcing, is for safety. Because basically, normally the regulator is detached at least some distance or significant distance away from the alternator, because you've got basically a control voltage controlling a main high current output. So this could be a meter away, it could be several meters away. So with this wire here, if it was to short or chafe on something, typically you'd expect it would chafe to negative, and that would cut that out. With this here, you've got a hot wire coming through here, and then that's effectively that's full 12 volts there. So if this wire chafes or shorts to earth, that will give full voltage into your field, which will make the alternator ramp to 100%. So whilst that way is a better way operation on the electronics, it's considered less safe. So you just got to be a bit aware of that. There is ways around that. And commonly this way is considered safer. So putting that into practice, this alternator here is a Bosch alternator, very common in Australia from the 70s. It came in about 3 major updates, but basically they came in 12 and 24 volt options, and they started from a lowly 30, 35 amps, and then now you've got 12 volt versions over 100 amps. And they're all very much, a lot of the parts relatively interchange between all the models. So the later model ones come with this internal reg brush box unit. So the brush box and the regulator built into one. I accidentally dropped this and snapped the brush off whilst I was getting this video ready. So silly on my mistake. And yeah, so you can see from that, I'm going to focus. It's a 28 volt alternator or 24 volt alternator. So on the older alternators in the 70s, they had these external reg brush boxes. So if you look at that, it's got DF and D positive. So obviously that's for the field. And if you look through there, you can see where the cable routing goes. So it goes from the outside, underneath, and around to this to that pin there, the DF pin. The other one, it goes through there to that solder section there, and you can see it goes to this plate here. So if I was to use this as is into this alternator, this would make this alternator what you'd call a P-type alternator. So we're supplying the current, and then it's grounding itself through this screw pin here. So if I then was to cut this off and then either change that to this pin over here, there, so that went to the other pin, so I had both pins there, I could then make it a P or an N type. So it's not much of a so it's easy way to do it. So which way you do it's up to you, but just remember with it, just to be aware of that process there, and make sure you're covered for fail safes with your fusing and so forth. So you may have to put an extra, it may pay to put an extra fuse here, or your fusing is sized specifically to what the field current is going to be. So an alternator on this, it might only be like 3 amps for what you're trying to get out of it, depending on the speed and so forth. So then based on that, then you go, okay, then I'm just going to put a 5 amp fuse into it, and then you're covered. So if there's any more questions for stuff like that, I'm happy to do a video up on it. But yeah, as you can tell, P and N type, there's nothing to it. It's just basically how you're putting the voltage into the fields, into the slip rings, and that's it. So if you're modifying alternators, just be aware that this is very, very common, that they'll have one pin is grounded to the body or grounded to positive. So, and in case you wonder, I know this will probably come up as a question, this guy in here, you can cut that out on this alternator because that's just a diode trio. Diode trio is just used to excite this and turn this guy on. So you don't need it. Well, at least for the applications I do it with marine and those regulators I've mentioned. So have a good one.